Hey guys, this is the part two of my conversation with Tim Posney from MidiQOL. In this one, we're going to cover things like how MIDI calculates damage on saves and range attacks and special damage. Then we're going to talk about conditions and activation conditions. We're also going to cover like just rolling with advantage and disadvantage, simple one that a lot of us don't realize is capable there. And we're going to talk about where to find some MIDI friendly items and feats and spells. So there's some compendiums and modules that you can get that will have automation built in out of the box. And we'll even get into like MIDI even does like battle statistics. So with that, let's just jump into the conversation with Tim.
All right, so we've got onto this. We're now onto the saves tab. MIDI can auto check saves or not, as you wish. And in fact, we saw that earlier with the rotting fist, where it targeted the character, worked out who needed to save, sent a message or displayed a chat saying you need to save, and then collected the save result when they did the roll. As I said, you can use other modules like let me roll that for you, or no module and just have the players work out that they need to do a click. There's a chat message prompt if you want that solution, or it can be completely automatic. There's a couple of niche ones. There's fail saves from friendly caster. So it's possible to say that, and this is very new, inside a spell, if you target a friendly target, you want them to auto fail the save. So it's ones where you're applying conditions which are useful, but some will otherwise get in the way. Now, one of the areas of the biggest confusion is how much damage gets done when a player saves. If there's nothing special in the item description, then when you save, you'll do half damage, is the usual rule. The half comes from this figure here, the default saving throw multiplier. Unless you know what you're doing, there's no reason to change that. For weapons, specifically, because they have the fields available, just expand this, you'll see there are a number of extra fields here. No damage on save, full damage on save, or half damage on save. So that if they save, the player takes no damage. If they save, they take full damage. And if they save, they take half damage. You can do the same things for spells by putting text in the description. For example, if I wanted to annoy my sorcerer, I could change his Eldritch Blast spell to do no damage on save and give it a save. To do that for spells, because these fields are not available, and I chose not to try and add them to Foundry, it actually looks in the description. So you can put no damage on save in the description. And if that's present, it will get picked up. And then if the target saves, it'll do no damage.
Wow, fascinating. So half damage on save, full damage on save, that would be the...
Correct. So that's how saving throws work. There is a special case, mainly for historical options, that if this is not checked, then spells will do half damage on save unless no damage on save or full damage on save appears in the text. If you toggle this button, then you need to have something in the text to define spells that will do half damage on save, i.e. the text half as much damage. Most of the time you don't need this. Again, it's historical from when there were slightly less effective features available to do this stuff.
Okay.
Now, prompt players to do saves. We sort of talked about that. You can just let me roll that for you. Let me roll that for you plus query, so it'll auto pop up the dialog box. Chat message, where it just sends a message to chat telling them to do a save, but does nothing else. Or Monk's Tokenbar, which is what this is set to. For the GM, there are two options, one for unlinked and one for linked tokens. Generally, unlinked tokens are ones you don't care about much. They're ones that you might have lots of on the map. Whereas linked tokens are either special creatures that you've created as characters rather than NPCs, or if the GM is playing player characters on their behalf, this will apply. There's a timeout on how long before auto rolling. So if the players can't do their roll in 30 seconds, it'll take over and do the roll for them. Or if they're away from keyboard or whatever. Sometimes that happens and everyone gets sick of waiting.
What do you set that as if you don't want that to occur at all?
0. If you set it to 0, then it'll never time out. I tend not to do that. I'd recommend putting it at something bigger because once it's stuck, it's stuck. You really have to start again. But you can leave it at 0. All right, auto apply damage. This is probably one of the biggies that it does. So you'll see here it's created a chat card with the damage. it's applied saving throws and immunities. So what's happened here, he's taken normal damage plus necrotic damage and failed his save. So he could have taken, sorry, he's applied necrotic damage, 31 points of damage. And why has he taken any damage? Oh, because it's split damage, that's why. This is why I like to use the module, because as a DM, I can never get it right. So what's happened is the Mummy Lords attacked the Cleric, doing a combination of bludgeoning and necrotic damage, 13 plus 4 bludgeoning damage and 14 points of necrotic damage. It turns out that the Cleric is immune to necrotic damage. And so what's happened is, how much damage should that do? Well, it's 17, the bludgeoning, but none of the necrotic. So you'll see here, it rolled 31 points of damage, but it only did 17. And if you hover over this, it will show you anything that's relevant. So for example, damage immunity to necrotic. So as a DM, you can then go back and work out that, yes, it's actually correct. In practice, I don't check it anymore because it just gets it right.
That's amazing.
And it just saves so many things that you might forget about, that it's just so much easier. You can choose to say no plus damage card, in which case it won't automatically apply the damage, but just give you this card. On this card, you can undo the damage if, for example, it got it wrong. You can reapply it if you want. Or if it turns out that it got the calculation wrong, you can say do the full damage. And so what's happened is he's taken the full 31 points of damage.
Okay.
And you can play with that as much as you like. So for people who don't trust it, I recommend no plus damage card, and then you can check it each time. Damage immunity. So you can say, I don't care about these immunities, I don't trust them, or they're black magic or whatever. You can have it not do that. You can apply immunities, which is damage resistance and so on. And immunities plus physical covers those immunities to things like physical damage or non-silver weapons, that sort of stuff. So you can choose to include those as well. As part of that, MIDI decides that a weapon is magical in one of two ways. Either it has the magical property set, or it has a plus in its attack bonus, because most of the SRD items just have an attack in the attack bonus, or used to. If you enable this setting, then they have to have the magical property set for it to do it.
Great. I always wondered how that worked.
All right. The next one is complicated. It's rolling other damage. It's probably easiest if I show you what happens. So I have here a giant spider. Its main attack is its bite. And it's one of quite a number of things that do base damage, damage formula, and then special damage, if the attack hits, for example. Or more importantly, if it saves. So we know that the spider does a piercing damage, and then you have to do a save or take poison damage. Now, there's no way to set that up in core Foundry. You have to do that by hand. So this setting that we're looking at in MidiQOL allows you to do those sorts of effects. So, for example, if we do a bite, okay, so the bite hit. It's now prompting for the reactions on this character. We'll choose not to do a reaction. Good, that's exactly what I wanted to see. All right, so it's done 2 lots of damage, 11 damage of bite, 4 damage of poison. He succeeded on the saving throw, so it's half damage on save, which is the normal behavior. So you'll see here that the damage done was 13, which is the 11 plus 2.
Yes, great.
If he'd failed to save, it would have done all 15. So there's no mucking around with those sorts of effects. They also work out of the box using the SRD. So this creature has had no changes done to it out of the SRD, except that I gave it a huge attack bonus, so it wouldn't be waiting all day for it to hit. And I put a type of the damage in here, which the SRD doesn't do. But otherwise, it's a stock standard SRD item, nothing that has to be done. So that's quite a lot of time saving.
Yeah, that's incredible. I had no idea it was doing so much. I just know I wasn't working as hard as I felt like I should have.
All right. All right. There's a couple of others, but I'll come back to those because they will come up more obviously. Another new feature is the ability to mark targets as wounded or defeated or unconscious. So for example, if this spider got taken down to 10 hit points, I'll show you in runtime what you have to do to set up wounded. If I take it down to 0 points, you'll see that it's marked as dead, and if it's in the combat track, it'll be marked as defeated. So that's all automatic. That's a feature that is available in Combat Utility Belt, but because I now use convenient effects generally for everything, I've decided to add it as a feature. Oh, it's probably not worthwhile. Anyway, if there's a condition named wounded in your custom effects, then MIDI will automatically apply that to a creature when it gets to less than whatever the percentage hit points was, like 50%. So when it gets below 50, the players get some sort of indication.
I see. Yep, I've seen that before. Yeah.
In my
you're saying that if I had Combat Utility Belt installed and enabled, it would use that to show the wounded effect?
No, if Combat Utility Belt is installed, that's functionality that you can set up automatically in Combat Utility Belt. So you wouldn't use the MidiQOL to do that.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, so it's only to support it where there's no module that would do it.
Got it.
It's just like the MidiQOL feature to hide names in combat, where Combat Utility Belt does it. So for attack and damage rolls, MIDI leaves it to that. For the ones which Combat Utility Belt won't cover, MIDI picks up that functionality.
Are you automatically detecting that Combat Utility Belt's installed and enabled and disabling those things? Okay, correct. So I don't have to worry about turning a feature off or on. You're mitigating that.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of work under the hood to work out which modules are installed.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, activation conditions. That's quite useful as well. And it's another feature which is a little bit complicated, but let's bring up our favorite cleric. He has a Mace of Disruption. And it's basically just an extremely ordinary mace with a couple of extra features. You'll see that it's got an other damage formula of 2d6, which is the Mace of Disruption bonus damage. And then a condition here, which says if it's a fiend or an undead, then roll the other damage, otherwise don't. So let's have a look how that works. So if this character was going to attack a spider with his mace,
is there a hotkey where you can roll advantage or disadvantage?
Yes.
Okay.
So for example, here.
How is advantage and disadvantage calculated? Are you somehow detecting that, or?
Yes, so it detects the key press, or it detects any flags that are set. So it uses, in fact, let me show you, because, so in the configure controls, which is the standard Foundry tool, there's now a set of settings for MidiQOL. So advantage is alt left or alt right, control, disadvantage control left, control right, versatile, other, critical, and toggle, which toggles automatic rolling. So if for some reason you don't want to have it go through automatically, you can press T and click, and it will bring up the default card.
I see.
So for example, I'll just heal our spider so I can actually attack it. So instead of bringing up the full automated card, it's brought up this card instead.
Right.
And then you can go ahead and click buttons.
How would somebody be able to write that themselves?
There's some information on it in the README. They're a little bit complicated. If you've never done any coding, they're pretty hard, I guess. But there's a few shortcuts. Sorry?
It looks hard. I wonder, are there compendiums where this is already kind of written and included in these items?
Yes, so there's a couple of, well, this particular activation condition stuff is pretty new. So there won't be many compendiums that have it, but there are increasing numbers. MidiQOL ships with a sample compendiums inside it. And that tries to give examples of how you might do some of the effects that you want to do. So Mace's Disruption is included there. Dragon Slayers are included there. So that a lot of the time, because it's got the generic feature set up, then you can go ahead and try it.
That's great.
Make simple changes. There are two modules that I would call out. One is called DAE SRD, and one is Midi SRD, written by Kandashi. And they have a lot of spells, items, effects, and so on written to take advantage of DAE and Midi SRD.
I see. Great.
I know they're a little bit behind, so that's the only problem that I'd have. But in general, they're very strong.
Great.
All right. So this is what should happen. Mace's Disruption hits the Mummy Lord. Mummy Lord failed at saving, succeeded in its saving throw, still took full damage. And the reason for that is there's a special effect on Mace's Disruption, is that if the creature fails a save, it may be destroyed. At very least, it'll be frightened or destroyed. So, for example, you'll see here that it's got the frightened condition. That only gets applied if the creature failed its save.
Got it.
If I didn't have full damage on save, then the creature would take half damage on save. So it's a way of just tweaking how things work. I want it to take full damage, but I want it to save against the extra effect, which is the frightened.
I see.
So it's really just a question of mixing and matching and changing things around to get the exact order you want. Well, we got through the whole workflow settings, which is the vast bulk of them. The last one, there's MISC. You can choose to use this condensed roll display where all the attack, the damage, and everything all happen in one card. You can turn that off, and then each of those will get their own card. I should save the settings first. So you'll see that you get a whole bunch of chat cards.
Yes.
I find that really disconcerting, but some people like it. It's also quite important when you've got a lot of things going on, like overtime effects and that sort of stuff, which I'll come to in a sec. Condense just puts the attack and damage on the same line, no big deal. Midi will keep statistics of the rolls that are done. So, for example, during this combat, and including previous ones when I was testing, Saela's done 58 attacks, 8 with a Mace's Disruption, just numbers that people may or may not be interested in. Someone wanted to see stats, or in particular, I used it when people were complaining that they got too many fumbles or too many critical hits.
Now,
and then pull up the stats.
Players can't look this up, right? You look this up and then share with them.
Well, you can actually allow them or not.
Oh, okay.
So if they are enabled to do it, then they can only see their own stats. The next one, this world key mapping, this is a new one. You remember I said in the configure controls, where is it gone? You can change what these keys are.
Yeah.
The way Foundry works, that's a per client setting. So if the GM wants to change it so that, I don't know, critical attack is Z instead, that will only apply to his client. Each player would have to go and do it. So there's a setting in here, world key mappings. If this is set, then the players can't change them. Only the GM can. And it's shared across all of them. MIDI custom sounds. I haven't set this up. It tends not to be something I'm too fussed about. Basically, if you're using the merge card, the default sounds from the game won't get played. So you won't hear dice rolls and so on. So to fix that up, you can create custom sounds inside MIDI, and it gives you a bit more flexibility. You create a playlist, and then you just choose sounds from that playlist to be played. The last one I want to cover is optional. These are a bunch of optional rules, some of which are useful, some of which aren't. You can disable them all by doing that, or enable them and then choose which one you want. Incapacitated actors can't make attacks. Hidden invisible attackers have advantage. Attacking removes hidden invisible. Check weapon range when attacking. That's the one that you saw earlier where it blocked it. It also knows about wall heights, so you can't shoot over walls. Walls block ranged attacks. This is if you're standing at the edge of a corner of a wall, and you can see the target, you may not be able to hit it because the centers have to not pass through a wall. So you can actually say center check plus levels. Levels is another module that probably people know about for setting up 3D scenes. You can use that instead, and that will then go ahead and use this levels check, which is what percentage of the token is visible. If I had DND helpers installed, you can also choose to use the DND helpers 4-point check. So there's different things available. You can include distance, height differences. So if someone's 200 foot in the air, you can't hit them with your mace, even if they're directly above you. Ranged attacks when a foe is closer than 5 feet have disadvantage. This is a rule that everyone seems to forget. But this just automatically says that if you're making a ranged attack and there's an enemy standing next to you, you're at disadvantage.
But will you check for what's that feat that lets you actually shoot? You'll check for that feat.
So if there's a foe within 5 feet, then you'll attack at disadvantage if using a ranged weapon.
No, I mean there's a special feat in D&D that lets you shoot from 5 feet away. It's
sharpshooter. No.
I want to say it's like crossbow master or something like that.
Yeah, I do check for that.
Wow, boy, you've thought of everything, Tim.
Well, no, the people using it have thought of everything. They say I've enabled this and it doesn't respect crossbow master, so I end up fixing it generally. Damage reduction, that's another feature that you don't see much of on the interface, but is available. You can give creatures, actors, whatever, damage reduction so that it adjudicates how much damage reduction and reduces the incoming damage by that much. And there's all sorts of flags and even a special rule that says only use the best one. Active defense is a rule variant, which I've implemented and is sort of neat, but probably needs some more work. If you enable it, then when a monster attacks a character, instead of the DM rolling an attack, the character will have to roll a saving throw, calculated to have the same effect. But what it means is when monsters attack, players get to do rolls instead of just watching the DM roll.
Okay, great.
Challenge mode armor, I probably won't go into that simply because I'm not a super fan of it, but it is there. If you want to know what it is, there's some description in the README.
Fair enough.
Last one is DDB Gamelog. That was put in by request. There's a module called DDB Gamelog, which lets you roll on DND Beyond and have those rolls come into Foundry. If you've got that module and you're a Patreon and enable this, then it will adjudicate those rolls as if you'd done them in Foundry and apply damage and all that sort of stuff.
Okay, so that's it for today. In the part 3, the last part of the series, Tim and I are going to get into more of the modules and some of these advanced functions that are available with MidiQOL to really get the maximum, functionality out of it. So stay tuned for that one, and let me know in the comments, and let Tim know in the comments what other questions you have. What would we cover in a follow-up video in case we don't cover it in part 3? In case you're playing around with it and you get stuck in some places, want to know how to do things, just let us know in the comments what you'd like us to build. And in the meantime, have fun making your maps.